Welcome everybody to Eco Physiotherapy Presents Health, Wellness, and Lifestyle. My name is Madeline Golick and I am the owner of Eco Physiotherapy and a pelvic health physiotherapist. And my guest today is Andrea Henry. Welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Madeline.
I am really excited to talk about this topic just because I think it's relevant to me, number one, but I think it might be relevant to others. So before we get into telling people what that is, can you tell us a little bit about you?
Sure. So I'm a mom of three, 9, 7, and just turned 3. A wife of 1. I was that clear.
Yeah.
And I'm a business lawyer and a mediator with a specific interest in family businesses and partnerships. So businesses that are owned by more than one person.
Excellent. So we're going to be talking today about family disputes, specifically in business. But I wanted to kind of find out or build some context for our audience, like what's your experience in that realm?
So it's difficult to run a business with someone else. Whether it's just one other person, it's your friend from high school or college, it's especially difficult to run a business with family members because you're not just dealing with the business issues. You're dealing with things that date from childhood. And so while it can be a lot of fun and while owning a business with someone else gives you, you can grow the business faster, you can have lots of different skills that otherwise you'd have to reach out into strangers to get
and reach into your pocket.
And reach into your pocket to
as
pay
well,
someone.
yeah.
So it can be a lot of fun, and there's a great sense of, you're building something for the family. It can also be ripe for disputes. And because it's very difficult to separate personal from business when you're related to your business partner, that's a really particular area that I like working with to help businesses over that hump and to help families make money and be successful at business and also still be able to sit across the table at Thanksgiving.
At Thanksgiving, yeah. And I assume that this would be also applicable to like husband and wife.
Absolutely.
Well, family, just
family.
Yeah, absolutely.
Chosen family this time.
Exactly. So in your experience, what leads to disputes? Like, what do you see?
So the key thing is lack of communication, like in any area of life. So we're often socialized to not say what we feel because it's going to hurt somebody else's feelings. But those feelings don't go away. So what happens often in families and in businesses is people will bite their tongue because they think, I'll just sweep it under the carpet and I'll just focus on the business. And there are only so many things you can sweep under the carpet before you trip over that bump, right?
Yeah, right.
And then you have resentment, and then everything bubbles up. And sometimes it bubbles up at a really inconvenient moment, like in front of clients, when you're going to the bank to get a new loan. So those things bubble up when it's not useful for the business. One of the other things that I see a lot when people come with disputes is a failure to appreciate the contributions of the other person. So quite often in business, you've got a person who is really good at getting clients. They're the best salesperson ever. And you've got the person who is the conscientious, making sure that all the accounts are taken care of. And then you have the dreamer, the one that comes up with the great ideas, as an example.
Yes.
And so what often happens is the person who's getting the sales thinks, well, I'm most important because I'm bringing in the clients. The person who's doing the accounts and making sure that all your books are in order, well, it would all fall to pieces if I wasn't there.
Right.
And the dreamer says, this wouldn't be even in existence if not for me. And what happens is you get everyone thinking that they are the most important person in the business, and they don't always fully appreciate the contributions of the other. And that can lead to tussles. And it usually comes up when it comes time for compensation or recognition of people's roles in the business. And then a lack of a plan to deal with issues. So as a lawyer, I assume that things will go wrong. That's just how we're trained, right?
Yeah. You have to be prepared for the worst case.
That's it. So somehow, somewhere, things will go wrong. I think it's much better to assume that there will be some disputes. Let's accept that it's not going to go smoothly. What's the plan for when things don't go right? How do we deal with the dispute? And then, especially for family businesses, so this would be the fourth thing, there are issues that come up in childhood. So you get claims of favoritism. So mom bought pony lessons for you when you were 6 and I never got to have them. And those things, again, bubble up through time. It is they particularly come to the surface around times of transition. So maybe your parents are retiring and now leaving it to the siblings. or you're going to expand the business, and there's a decision to like open a new location, or grow geographically, or bring on new employees. Those times of big decision making, the underlying issues tend to come up. So those are the areas that I'd say most often the disputes come up from.
I think we were talking once also about like if there's more than one sibling and one sibling works in the business while the other may contribute here and there, but not as much.
Exactly.
And if there's no plan for that, and the parent should
pass away, or even when they're deciding how to set it up. So, if you've got, for example, 3 siblings, and you've got one who is a rock star in the business, and they know that they want to carry on the business, but the parents think, oh, but it's not fair, because I've got 2 other kids, and I don't want to just leave it to this one. What happens is either you leave it to that one, and the other 2 get upset, because, if you've got a successful business, that's a sizable part of your asset base. Or what usually happens is that instead they leave it to all 3. And the one who's actually doing the work then has a ton of resentment, sort of understandably, towards his siblings who he doesn't think is contributing as much. So it's really important to talk.
Yeah.
Like, this is business, this is couples, this life. It's important to talk and be open about it. And if you've got a situation where you know that one sibling or 2 siblings are contributing a lot more, have a family conversation about it. This is what we're thinking of doing. This is how we're going to help the 2 of you who aren't involved. But you have to acknowledge that your brother or your sister, whoever it is actually working in the business day in, day out, and has been doing so for the past 5 years while you went off to university to be, an architect or whatever.
Yeah.
So I think it's just having the conversation. A lot of times people avoid the conversation.
Because it's hard. Right? Like, you may sit down and start this conversation, and it might get heated and be a source of argument and resentment and all of that. But I guess it at least starts the conversation, and then you can say, okay, well, this isn't going well. We need to bring in a mediator.
Well, this would have been my next point.
Right.
So quite often it is difficult, right? And these are people that you've got long, and it's important relationships, right? If you're in business with your husband, and that fails, like, that's going to obviously affect the marriage. If it's your best friend that you've known for 20 years, if it's your mom and your dad and your siblings, these are really important relationships that arguably are more important than the business itself.
Right.
And so, and the problem is, if you don't deal with the relationships, or the relationships get damaged, it inevitably leads to failure of the business, because you can't work together. So if it is that you can't have that conversation, it is very helpful to bring in an independent, neutral third party that doesn't have a dog in the race, right? They don't know anyone. They don't have any benefit to gain. It's not a lawyer who's representing one side versus the other side.
Right.
It's a mediator who's an impartial third party. The other thing with dealing with a mediator, are if you're looking how to avoid exacerbating the dispute, making it worse, is to try to avoid personal attacks. Which we naturally do as human beings, right? Like, you make me feel horrible, and you always think you should get your way, right? I have 3 kids. They do exactly the opposite of what I've just said.
Yeah. Yes.
But ideally, as adults, we can say, it makes me feel this way when this happens.
Yes.
Or it would be really important to me if such and such a thing happens. So that you're taking the attention on the individual, and more looking at the situation. The second thing that I would say is, try to focus on what your underlying goal is, or what the underlying hurt and solution to that hurt is. Because quite often we get entrenched in positions.
Right.
So when I'm dealing with families or with business partners who are disputing, you often hear, I'm not going to accept anything less than an extra 1,000 shares, or an extra 10,000 and whatever. And it's the position.
Right.
But that position is coming from you don't appreciate what I've done in the business.
Right.
Or you don't remember 3 years ago when we started, and I didn't see my kids for 6 months because I was working on the business, and now we're successful, and now you want to push me to the side. It's the underlying issue that needs to be solved, because that's where the hurt is. And sometimes even if you throw money at it, it doesn't
really fix the underlying emotion. Yeah.
And again, and this sort of is blasphemous as a lawyer, but courts can, first of all, going to court is time consuming and expensive and everything else bad that you can imagine on earth.
Yeah.
The only people who enjoy being in court and benefit from it are the lawyers, right?
They get the nice paycheck.
That's right.
And the family members are usually left with not what they wanted, and not only on that, but now there is that breaking apart of the family and the relationship.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. So you really don't want to escalate it more than you have to. And the advantage of having an independent person who is not a judge come in is that you can have solutions that are way outside of what a court would be able to do for you, where you can really deal with the underlying emotional issues, right? So, you do not want to be in a situation. I've dealt with families where literally that happens. You can't have Thanksgiving dinner together. And if you've got a big family, you get factions. So 2 siblings side with this one, and 2 siblings and an aunt side with the other one, and now you've got whole sections of your family who aren't speaking to each other.
And never mind how that then translates down the generations.
Exactly.
Right? And the impact all because of something that could have been sort of more easily or readily resolved if it was like getting to the bottom of what the hurt was rather than the shares or the money part.
Exactly.
Right?
That's exactly the case.
Because money comes and goes, right? But your family, you're hoping that your family's there for you and that you can, keep the unit together.
On your deathbed, you're not going to say, I really wish I had those extra 100 shares. You're going to regret spending the past 20 years not speaking to your brother.
Right. Exactly.
Right? So it's really important. It's something that you got to get right.
Right.
And I think that's what I would want people to take away from it, that it's really important that you deal with the underlying hurts, and that you don't escalate it and allow the personal attacks to get too bitter, because once you've said things, it's difficult to rein them back in. The other thing that comes to mind is the importance of having a plan. So quite often when I deal with family businesses or partners where the individual partners are very close to each other because they're married or they're very good friends, the first thing I will hear is, I don't need an agreement because this is my friend or this is my husband.
I was just going to go there and say, okay, so, you have these 2 friends, or you have this husband and wife, or you have this family who's getting ready to start a business. Should they consult somebody, or should they have a agreement?
Absolutely. More so even so than if it's strangers. People think if it's a stranger and I don't know this person or I don't know them that well, then I'm going to make sure that I've got all my T's crossed and all my I's dotted. And people don't do it with family. One, because they think, it'll be fine, it's family. And also because, something you said earlier, people feel uncomfortable doing it. It is especially, there are more disputes and more legal battles between friends and family members than there are between strangers. Because you instinctively don't trust the strangers.
Right.
So you're going to protect yourself.
That makes total sense.
And the thing is, it's not that your family member or your friend is on purpose trying to do something underhanded or trying to screw you over. It's that quite often if you don't have that discussion and get the agreement in writing, sometimes you genuinely just don't know you're in a disagreement before you even start the company. So say, for example, you and I go into business.
Okay.
And we have this wonderful idea and we trust each other and we're going to go into wonderful. I haven't shared with you that I think that this business is a wonderful thing and our kids together are going to run it after we go.
Yeah.
Your plan is we're going to build this business and in 7 years we're going to sell out to whoever the big guys are in the business and you are going to move to Bora Bora and live on a beach, right?
Nice, I like that, yeah.
It's a nice dream, right?
Yeah, totally.
Which is fine, and neither of those things are wrong. However, if we haven't shared that with each other, and 5 years down the line we get an offer to purchase, and I say, what are you talking about? Of course we're not selling this. This is for our kids. You're like, no, what are you talking about? I've already booked the ticket to Bora Bora, right?
Right.
It's not because we're trying to be mean to each other or be underhanded. It's simply that from the very beginning, we weren't on the same page.
We had different visions.
We had a different vision for the business. So working with a professional that has been through this many times before and worked specifically with businesses that are owned by more than one person helps you to uncover the areas that you might not have thought about.
Right.
So we may be in agreement in terms of what
Product, design, marketing,
all the rest of it.
yeah.
Hours of, but we may not be agreed on exit strategy. We may not be agreed on how big we want to grow, right? Some people may be more willing. Okay, if we get a lot of business in, I'm willing to work 7 days a week, and the other person may be, nope. My family time is sacred. I want to grow only as long as it allows me to have 2 or 3 days off a week. Right. Again, that's not something that people generally speak about in the beginning,
or think necessarily about, because you're thinking startup. You're just trying to get your feet wet. You're trying to get the company going. Just make enough to pay the bills and whatever loans or whatever.
And I get that. I have been, a startup and all those other things, but because the professionals who work in the area have seen the
patterns,
issues, the patterns, right?
Yeah.
We can say, look, I know you haven't thought about this, and you probably don't think it's important, but it is. Mm-hmm. I had a client who just last month called to say thank you because she was starting a business with a very good friend, and they weren't sure whether they needed a shareholders agreement. I'm like, it's better to have it and not need it than the other way around. And we were going through things like that, like what's your exit plan and how many hours do you see yourself working in the business, et cetera, et cetera. And a year and a half later, the business relationship was kaput. And she called to say, she goes, I didn't think that we would need it. And I did think that you were probably, way out there with what
or
you thought was going to happen.
Trying to get me to do something extra.
But I'm really thankful because now we have a really clear roadmap. They didn't even really need me because everything had been set up. If this happens, then this is the solution. If this happens, then this is the solution. And that way you don't have a dispute because it's all in black and white.
Right.
And you agree to it. As my husband and I joke about, when you have prenups, you agree when you're still in love. It's the best time to have the agreement. When we're still happy and everything's going well and we're at the beginning of a business and we're still in love.
And you tend to be more fair, right? You want equality
right.
and so really, and I think that's just it, right? You were saying like transition. So for example, I'm thinking, when a company goes from sort of being startup to success, that's definitely a time where you might see different ideas become problematic, or when things aren't going well.
Absolutely.
I can see, because you're already under a lot of stress. Maybe your investment in the marketing strategy didn't work. Maybe the business isn't necessarily failing, but maybe your business plan, business strategy isn't working. Yeah. And that can foster some
because you're
feelings.
Under stress. Right?
Yeah.
You're under stress and people start to blame the other person normally for whatever's going wrong. And again, at what is your break-even point? Well, sorry, not your break-even point. At what point do you say we're not going to sink any more money into this? Right. That's, again, an area where business partners will disagree because I may be willing to go all in and, I'm doing this business until I'm destitute on the streets. And another person may say, nope, I need to keep my nest egg. I'm not going to put my house up, for example, as collateral if we need to have a loan. If we get to that point, then I'm out. That's a conversation that you need to have ahead of it being necessary.
Absolutely.
Because when you have to have that conversation under stress and you can't pay your bills and your employees are not happy, it's not going to be a happy conversation. And then we get into really, escalating arguments.
Yeah. So, any piece of advice that you would want to give to anybody who's thinking about startup? One little tidbit, anything that comes to mind?
Oh, where to start?
Number one, go consult.
Number one, consult with a professional, I'd say. And I think whether it's a lawyer or a business coach or an accountant for the financial side of things, most people will give a complimentary consultation. Yes. And sometimes it's just a matter of them opening your eyes to things that you haven't thought about. Right? So I think finding out what you don't know. Right. would be my tip.
Yeah,
right?
That's probably the best tip. Find out what you don't know because you don't know what you don't know.
What you don't know. And,
right.
And your job is to be, the wonderful florist or physiotherapist or doctor or whatever it is, you're really good at your craft and you're often in a blind spot about lots of other things. And when it comes to legal and finances, you know, I understand. For me, they're fun. But for most people, it's not an area that they really want to deal with. It's intimidating. There's language that people don't understand. If you have someone who's dealt with other startups and understands the particular stresses and challenges that startups face, you can get some good advice right at the beginning without, you know, having to pay a set. And a good advisor will be able to tell you, look, there are these 10 things that you need, but really right now, these 2 are important. And as your business grows and as your budget allows, then we put these other things into place.
Right.
But I say go find out what you don't know. Go to people who have worked with your type of business or this stage of your business before, and make sure that you get good advice. And then the second thing, I know you asked for one. But the second thing would be to have regular check-ins with your business partner, right? Like, I know meetings get a bad rap, and meetings that don't accomplish anything are a time sink.
Yeah.
But have regular check-ins. Is this working as we expected? Are you still happy? Are we still having fun? Are we still okay?
Yeah.
Because quite often as the business grows and you get busy, you tend to see each other less and less. And you're not doing those regular check-ins to make sure that you're still on the same page. And a year later, you wake up and you guys have gone from here to here. Right? You've gone on completely different paths. So good advice and regular check-ins.
Okay. So my last question would be to companies who are currently running, everything's going really smooth. Yeah. You know, there's exit plans are not in the plan for a little while. Like everything's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Should they be worried? I mean, should they? I guess to some extent, there's always something.
Always be worried. No,
but would it be wise for them to have a consult?
I think it certainly doesn't hurt, right? I think businesses can be going well on the surface, and you can be making money, but not dealing with some other underlying issues. And again, if you haven't thought, so there's especially, start with the end in mind. It is really important to think about a succession and exit planning from the very beginning, because it will impact on how your business is growing. And a successful business that only exists if those 2 people who started it are there is not a business that's successful if it's a business that you want to sell.
Right.
So success has different definitions depending on what you want to do with the business. So I might be having a wonderful cash flow and lots of clients and everything's going well, but I don't have any of my nothing to systematize. If I get hit by a Mack truck tomorrow, the business is done.
Right.
That, for someone who wants to sell a business, is not a successful business, even though there's a lot of cash flow. So I still think it's useful to have a chat just to see that you've covered all your bases, if for nothing else, for peace of mind.
Right. Peace of mind. I think that's good, and peace, keeping peace in the family.
Exactly.
So I want to thank you so much, because I think this was really educational. And the thing is, as a family business, like there are things that, you don't consider.
Yeah.
And so I think this is really educational, and hopefully our audience, found it useful to maybe think, to at least get, the wheels kind of spinning.
Yeah.
Like, you know what, maybe we should just check in and see how things are going.
Exactly.
If at least nothing, check in with your business partners, check in with your family members. So thank you so much.
It was my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
And to our audience, stay tuned to the end of the video. We will have Andrea's contact information available at the end, also in the description, should you have any questions that you would like to consult with her regarding business. So thanks again.
Thank you.
All right. Until next time, bye-bye.